hard-eye. The yard sale discovery it started with a lazy Sunday morning, the kind where the sun is too bright and the air smells faintly of wet asphalt. I was driving through a sleepy suburb, the streets lined with houses whose paint peeled like scabs, when I saw a small table cluttered with glass jars and a wooden box that looked far too old for the neighborhood. The box was plain, roughly carved, with strange symbols etched into the surface. Not letters I recognized, just jagged lines curling into themselves, almost like a spiral trying to devour its own tail. A single latch held it closed, rusty and weak. I crouched beside the table. The elderly woman running the sale smiled at me. Her eyes were sharp, hawkish. "That box," she said. "Careful with that one. Lives inside." I laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. "Lives inside like bugs." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Not bugs. Not anything you've met before. Take it if you want, but it comes with responsibility, curiosity." One offered a few bills. She handed me the box with a warning that seemed to echo in my skull more than the air. "Do not open it tonight. Let it rest first." Back at my apartment, I placed the box on the coffee table. It smelled faintly of cedar and something coppery, like blood left in the sun too long. I examined the carvings, running my fingers over the spirals. At first, nothing happened. I checked my phone, poured a glass of water, and even considered making dinner. But then I heard it, a faint scratching sound. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a chair creaking or a window rattling, but it came from the box. Soft, deliberate, almost like fingernails dragging across wood. I froze. The box was closed. Then the latch clicked on its own. I swore I saw it twitch slightly, a subtle shiver that ran across the grain of the wood. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a rodent had slipped in during transport. Maybe it was stress. Maybe the elderly woman had been right about responsibility, but I had no idea what she meant. I told myself I would wait until morning to open it. Just a precaution. Hours passed. I tried to sleep, but the scratching continued, growing more insistent. Sometimes it sounded like it was moving beneath the box's surface, skittering closer to where I sat. Then I heard a whisper, low, sibilant, but unmistakable. "Open me." I spun around, heart hammering. My apartment was empty. My door locked. Nothing should have been able to speak, but the box, my hand still tingling from fear, shivered again. The latch lifted itself slightly, as if inviting me. I didn't open it. Not then. I could not stop hearing it, though. The whispering continued through the night, moving from one corner of the room to the next. It was patient, deliberate, learning my rhythm. And somewhere deep inside me, a thought began to form. Whatever was inside that box wasn't just alive. It was aware. Part 2. The first night, with it morning, did little to calm my nerves. The sunlight that streamed through my blinds should have been comforting, but the box seemed to absorb it, casting shadows that moved slightly against the grain. I avoided it while I made coffee, trying to convince myself that it was just wood, rust, and my imagination. By noon, I could no longer ignore it. The whispering had returned, soft and patient, like water seeping through cracks. "Open me," it said again, though this time the voice sounded closer, as if speaking directly into my ear. I tried ration a thought. "It's just stress. You bought an old box. It's wood and nails." I laughed at myself, but the laughter felt hollow. The air around it seemed heavier, the space between me and the box charged with something I could not name. That evening, curiosity won over. I slid a hand toward the latch, my fingers trembling. The box was warm and naturally warm, almost pulsing under my touch. The symbols carved into the wood seemed to twist beneath my gaze, spiraling in ways that made my stomach churn. With a deep breath, I flipped the latch. The lid creaked, groaning like a living hinge. I froze as a soft exhale escaped the box, warm and wet, smelling faintly of iron and decay. Inside, the box was empty. I blinked, unsure if I had imagined the sound. Then the whisper returned closer, more insistent. "Not yet." I slammed the lid shut, my hands shaking. The sound of scraping returned, this time from inside the box, faint but deliberate, as if something inside was trying to scratch its way out. Sleep that night was impossible. I moved the box to the floor, thinking distance might help. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard it scratching, whispering. Occasionally, faint tapping that sounded like tiny claws clicking against wood. Around 3 a.m., it spoke my name, clear and unmistakable. "Alex." I bolted upright. My apartment was silent. The box sat on the floor, still and harmless looking, but the whispering had left an imprint in my mind, a sense of being watched, of being hunted. Then, faintly, I realized the sound was moving, skittering across the floor toward me. My heart nearly stopped. I jumped out of bed and turned on every light. The sound stopped immediately, as though the light had burned it away. My rational brain told me it was impossible, but the warmth under my feet, the slight vibration in the floorboards told me otherwise. By morning, I was exhausted, twitching at every creak of the apartment. I tried to convince myself to leave it closed, ignore it, but the box pulsed with a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat. The whispering had become a faint hum, almost melodic, but threaded with malice. I realized I was no longer in control. The box was aware of me. It knew my name, my schedule, my fears, and now I feared. It wanted me to open it fully, not just the lid, but the part of myself I had no defense against. That night, I sat staring at it for hours. "Open me?" it whispered. The voice sounded intimate, almost affectionate, but I could feel the hunger behind it. I didn't touch it. Not yet. But I knew one thing with certainty. I could no longer pretend it was just a box. Part 3. The lid opens too far by the third night. I had stopped pretending I could ignore the box. Its whispers had grown more insistent, threading through the walls, following me into the bathroom, and even echoing faintly in my dreams. Every sound outside ring, tapping on the windows. A neighbor's car engine made me flinch, convinced it was the box moving closer. I sat on the edge of my couch, hands trembling, staring at the box on the coffee table. Its surface pulsed faintly, a heartbeat that matched my own. The symbols carved into the wood seemed to writhe, curling inward and outward like something breathing under the surface. "Open me," it said, soft, patient, and almost pleading. I reached for the latch, trembling. The warmth under my fingers was stronger than before, almost unbearable. My breath caught as I lifted the lid. Inside, there was nothing at first, just dark wood. But then I saw movement, subtle and wrong. A shadow shifted beneath the surface, a blackness that didn't reflect light. It rose slowly, curling upward, forming shapes that teased at a face, limbs, claws, but never fully formed. The box vibrated, humming like a living thing. I stepped back. The whispering intensified, overlapping voices now. My own voice, Fran's voice, and others I did not recognize, all urging me, coaxing me. "Just a little more," they hissed. "Let me out." The air grew thick and heavy, pressing against my chest. My apartment seemed to shrink, walls warping slightly. The box, no longer a simple object, was aware of every movement, every hesitation. I could feel it studying me, measuring my fear. Then the lid jerked in my hands, almost as if it had a will of its own. The shadow inside lunged upward, and I slammed the box shut. A high-pitched shriek echoed, like glass breaking and screams colliding, vibrating through my bones. I sank to the floor, gasping. My fingers were raw from gripping the edges of the box. Sweat poured down my face. But even in the silence that followed, I knew it had changed. The box had tasted my hesitation. It had learned how I feared. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time my eyes closed, the box whispered, breathed, shifted. "Open me," it insisted. Sometimes the words were in my own voice, sometimes a chorus of unfamiliar tones. I tried to leave it alone, cover it with a towel, even move it to the bedroom closet, but the scratching, the pulsing, the soft, wet breathing continued. And I realized something terrifying. It didn't just want to be opened. It wanted control. It wanted to become part of me. By the early hours, I was shaking. My rational mind screamed to throw it away, lock it in the basement, burn it, but some deep, primal part of me hesitated. The box whispered my name again, softer this time, almost affectionate. "Alex." I sat frozen, knowing I could not resist forever. The lid had opened too far once. I feared what would happen if I opened it completely. But deep inside, a chilling realization took hold. It might already be too late. Part 4. It escapes by the 4th night. I had stopped trying to resist. The box had become a presence in the apartment, moving subtly when I wasn't looking. I would glance away for a second, and the shadows around it shifted. The scratching under the lid had grown urgent, frantic, like claws scraping at the thin boundary between its world and mine. I told myself I could ignore it, that it was still confined, but deep down, I knew better. It began slowly. First, the lid rattled without my touch, a dry, hollow sound that echoed in the silent apartment. Then, the temperature dropped sharply, frost forming on the corners of the box despite the summer heat outside. The whispering returned, layered and urgent. "Alex? Let me out, please." I froze. The voice was no longer just coaxing, it was demanding. I stepped back, my foot catching on the edge of the coffee table. The box lurched forward, sliding across the wood floor as if propelled by unseen hands. My heart hammered as I lunged to stop it. The lid snapped open. The shadow inside shot out like liquid smoke, twisting and writhing in the air. It was no longer contained. It moved with terrifying purpose, shaping itself into glimpses of faces. I recognized neighbors, old friends, strangers from my past. Each form flickered, almost solid, then dissolved into nothingness. I stumbled backward, watching in horror as it slithered across the floor toward me, coiling and uncoiling like a living mist. It hissed, a sound that was part whisper, part screech, reverberating in my skull. "I am free," it said, tasting the air, tasting me. I grabbed a chair and swung it, but it passed through the shadow like water. The lights flickered, and my apartment warped around me. Walls stretched and bent. The ceiling pulsed, every corner hid movement, every reflection in a mirror showing something that wasn't there a moment ago. I ran to the door, trying to escape, but the shadow had already filled the room. It climbed the walls, wrapped around my legs like tendrils. My phone slipped from my hands. The flashlight barely cut through the darkness. "Alex." The voice now sounded directly inside my mind. It was no longer coaxing. It was intimate, predatory. "You opened me. Now you belong to me." Panic overtook me. I slammed the front door, the frame buckling under the pressure of its force. The shadow burst through, slipping under the cracks, seeping into every gap, every corner of my apartment. I screamed, bolting to the bathroom and locking myself in. The whispering continued from behind the door, echoing through the tiles. "I am everywhere. I am everything you fear. And now you are mine. Hours passed. I don't know how long. Eventually, the whispering slowed, retreating to soft hisses, leaving only the faint pulsing of the box on the floor closed, silent, but unmistakably alive. When I dared to peek, nothing seemed out of place. The apartment was still, the air normal again, the box innocuous, but I knew the truth. It had already escaped, not fully, not yet but enough. It had tasted freedom. It had tasted me, and it would return. I spent the night awake, staring at the box, dreading the moment it would speak again. Part 5. The Price of Curiosity. Morning came, but it brought no relief. The sun's light barely reached the corners of my apartment, as if the shadow had grown too comfortable to be chased away. I could feel it in the air, a subtle vibration, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I dared to touch the box. It was warm, pulsing faintly under my fingertips. The carvings on the surface seemed to twitch, spiraling inwards in a pattern I couldn't fully follow. And the whispering, it had returned, feigned, but insistent. Open me, it said. Patient, intimate, you know you want to. I forced myself to step back. I had learned too much, seen too much. This wasn't a toy or a puzzle. It was alive, a predator, a parasite, and it fed on curiosity, on fear, on the very part of a person that wanted to know. I considered calling someone for help, police, friends, even paranormal investigators, but the thought died the moment I imagined explaining what it was. They would never believe me. The box would be returned to my apartment alone, waiting, and it would whisper, softly, coaxing them. Too, I realized then the truth. It didn't just want to escape it, wanted witnesses. It thrived on being opened, on the horror it inspired. That night, I sat in my apartment, lights blazing, the box on the table before me. I thought about ignoring it, leaving it closed forever, but I could hear it faintly, calling, tugging at the edges of my mind. A reflection in the dark window caught my eye. For a split second, I thought I saw a shape behind me, not a shadow, but a form, a pair of glowing eyes, shifting like liquid. I spun around. Nothing. I knew it was patient. It would wait. It would learn my patterns. It would return stronger, smarter, and if I ever so much as touched the box again, it would be ready. I am writing this now as a warning. If you ever see an old box at a yard sale, carved with strange symbols, do not buy it. Do not take it home, because curiosity is exactly what it feeds on. And if you hear a faint whisper from the dark, telling you to open it, do not. Whatever is inside is alive, and once it tastes you, it never forgets. The box waits, and it remembers your name.